Today we're going to be talking about fertility education. That's not just about education in school, but about education in a much wider context. So educating young people, educating employers, and making sure that everyone starts to have more of an understanding about what infertility is and how it can affect you and how best to support those with fertility problems. So today I'm joined by Sharon Martin and by Anya Sizer, who both work for Fertility Network UK. So Sharon, what are you doing around education?
So in Scotland, we've got a really exciting programme called Future Fertility. And with this programme, we got some funding from Scottish Government, which was fabulous, which allows us to go out and engage with students and young people. Brilliant. So our main target is students, and we go out into the colleges and universities across the whole of Scotland talking to young people.
And Anya, what have you been doing around education?
So we're focusing on something called Fertility in the Workplace, which is looking at supporting workplaces, big organisations, small organisations, looking at how they can best help their staff. So helping organisations to see the prevalence of fertility issues and the necessity to really get good practice in place so that staff are well looked after. And we've been working with a range of organisations, companies, places, and it's been really positive, very exciting.
So Anya, I think it might be useful to start by finding out a bit more about the kind of impact that you see fertility problems having on patients' working lives.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think one of the key things that we do when we first go in is help people to see how widespread this is, and that, you know, we often hear about 1 in 6 couples, but actually that's not always including same-sex and single women who've gone on to have fertility issues post-treatment. So we're talking about huge numbers of people going through fertility problems, and that means that within a workplace, potentially you've got a huge number of your staff dealing with this as an issue. So that's the first starting point, is to help people to realise how common it is, and then to explain and to help unpack the fact that for each of those people, it's a really, really huge life event, a life crisis. And so going through fertility treatment really has the potential to derail people within their work context. And we talk about the Middlesex survey that we did a few years ago that found within long-term fertility issues, 90% of patients experience depression at some point. And this then obviously has a massive knock-on effect at work and your ability to function. So we go in, we talk about how common this is, the necessity to really get best practice in place and to support and encourage, and then we look at what that means for that individual workplace. So it's been really positive, feedback's been great.
Do you find that most employers are actually aware of the way that fertility problems can affect people when you first go in?
So it really varies. You do get some people that have either got personal experience or they know of someone that's been through it, or I always find this very encouragingly, that someone within their workplaces has come to a line manager, an HR rep, and explained the process, and they've really taken it on board, and because of that they've wanted to do work in this area. But it varies. So you get people that really are very open, very receptive, and then other people that just don't have an awareness of it, don't really understand the emotional impact, the practical impact on work. And so we almost are starting right at scratch with them. So it varies massively, but we do find that once we're getting the reality out there to them, it really does tend to produce a bit of a light bulb moment, followed by implementing some change within the organisation, and that's been great to see. And again, we've had feedback from members of the team, members of staff, saying thank you so much that Fertility Network have gone in and spoken about this, because actually I just feel so much less isolated now, and my work has got a better grip on the fact that this isn't just me, this is a common experience and we need to be dealing with it.
So what do you actually do when you go in there to try to help them understand more about it?
So the presentation tends to be focused around what we call a lunch and learn. It's an hour session. Half an hour is looking at some of our findings, some of the realities, looking at how this then impacts work. And then I'll open it up to question and answer. And for me, that's often the best time anyway, because that then gets to the heart of what that company wants to talk about. So it's about 30 minutes of presentation, 30 minutes of Q&A, and then often there's follow-up. So often there's things that come up. Maybe someone will contact us as a charity over the next few weeks, or maybe they'll send in a couple of questions that have come in anonymously afterwards. There's generally ongoing relationship, which again, as a charity, we're really, really keen to support, because we don't want this to be a hand grenade. If we go in, we drop information, we run off again. We want this to be the start of dialogue and helping companies to best support staff.
We know that lots of people do struggle at work when they've got fertility problems. What advice would you actually give people who are really finding it quite tough?
Yeah, firstly, to start off and say that that's absolutely normal. In our experience as a charity, and for many of us who've had personal experience, we absolutely would automatically assume that it's going to be difficult to balance work with treatments. So some people do manage it, but actually I'd say for the majority of people, the default is that this is going to be tricky to navigate both. So I would start off with just normalizing that and saying to people, look, this is tough. It's okay that it's tough. This is a big issue in your life. And then look at how best to support them. So who've they got on board? Who's helping, who's not helping maybe, what do they need practically, so looking at how much time off and flexible time they'll need, all of those kind of things. But it really starts with validating and normalizing their experience. And once you've done that, actually I think you give people permission to get the care that they need. And it is, the HFEA last year talked about patient care being absolutely paramount to the clinical experience of infertility. And it's not an optional extra. Self-care and getting practical care around you is as important as the medical aspect.
I think people are sometimes really anxious about actually saying anything about it to their employers, and a lot of people don't want to, do they? I mean, what would you say about that?
Well, it's a bit chicken and egg, that I guess, in that we need to do some work sometimes with organisations in order to explain to them how best to support their team. However, where possible, the support of a good line manager is invaluable. And it may be that line manager needs some practical help and some help from us as a charity to know what's needed. And we have fact sheets that can be downloaded and handed to line managers. But I would say, where possible, to tell one or two key people so that you can build that support structure around you and build that flexibility that you're going to need. So you don't have to tell everyone, but what you do need to do is to forward plan and think, how can I make my work life as positive as possible given the current circumstances? So what flexibility is needed, what emotional support will be needed, what practical support. And once you've got those things in place, I think it gives you that breathing space to just get on with the treatments. But yeah, one or two key people, if possible, is invaluable.
And if people feel that they need to take time off work during treatment, do they actually have any rights then?
So yes, it varies from place to place, but a lot of organisations these days are putting in the flexibility now and realising that actually we recommend 6 to 8 flexible working days, not full days off, but 6 to 8 flexible days. So allowing for that, and then certainly post embryo transfer, realising that your rights are similar to anyone else who's achieved a pregnancy. And you are to be treated as such, and so again, flexible working allowances are to be made. But I'd say at the moment it does vary from one place to another what's offered and what's assumed. And again, a lot of that comes back to helping and educating workplaces, which we are keen to do.
And do many companies actually have a fertility policy at the moment?
It's getting better, which I'm really grateful for. I think that comes slightly off the tale of the fact that so much work was done the last few years around menopause. And it feels like companies and organisations now are suddenly realising this is the next thing that needs to be looked at and has to be looked at. It varies massively. Some companies have got a fantastic, really robust policy in place, and everything is just there for people. Other people are starting to think it through, and other people, sadly, have just never even assumed that this will be needed. I do think there's a bit of a change, though, and I'm really encouraged by that. I think the more media work people like us as a charity have done, the more raising of it in society at large, the more people are honest and stick their head above the parapet and say, yep, this is an issue for me and it will be for other people, the more we can start to change workplace environments. So I'm hopeful that this is the next big change.
And is it something you'd encourage companies to think about?
They have to. I mean, even if you want to look at it purely from a financial aspect, we are seeing so many people taking sick days or going off long-term sick unless something is put in place right at the start. So if you think back to that 1 in 6 of your workforce will be facing some form of fertility problems at some point, better to have something in place right at the start rather than trying to negotiate and seeing people fall off because of sickness or mental health issues. So even from a purely financial point of view, this is essential. But then just in terms of workplace ethics and the emotional impact and having a happy staff team that wants to stay a part of the team, I think it's really key. And again, I'm hopeful that this is something that is being thought through, not as an optional extra, but as absolutely foundational to what we provide for our staff.
Do you have any examples of companies that have got really brilliant workforce fertility programs that you'd like to see in other places?
Yeah, we've had so many. It's been so encouraging. It's hard to name them all, but places like Transport for London, HSBC, Barclays, LinkedIn, they're all doing really, really great stuff. Apologies if I've missed you out. And we really have dealt with so many people this last year, but they've all been so proactive. They've all been places that have listened. You know, they've come along and said, we think we've got an idea of what this issue is, but please teach us, and then we'll take it from there. And I think that openness I've seen in some really big organizations, and I've just been incredibly touched. You know, we've had meetings where we've spoken to a couple of line managers and they've very tentatively said, oh, we've been approached. And then the next thing I know, they've got a lunch and learn up, they've got a buddy scheme, they've got helplines, they've got a workplace policy in place. And we've seen that really actioned quite quickly, and that's been wonderful. But more than anything, to then have an email from someone saying, do you know what, because of the lunch and learn, I don't feel alone. And because of Fertility Network, I know that support is there long term. And I just think that's amazing. It's been a real privilege to be involved with this, actually.
Thanks. That's really heartening to hear that it's really making a difference. Now we're going to talk about a very different way of raising awareness with Sharon. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what you're actually doing with young people, Sharon.
So here in Scotland, we go out into colleges, universities, third sector organisations that are engaging with young people, and we talk to young people about ways to protect their future fertility. So we're trying to look at it from, you know, the very beginning, because there is a number of people who have got fertility issues as a result of lifestyle choices they made when they were in college, university, or, you know, just leaving school and just finding their way in the world. So we go out and we engage with them. We're not out to promote that they go and get pregnant at the age of 18. We're out there to promote how to protect your future fertility, to ensure that at the point that you want to have a family, you are able to have a family and you've got all the information you need to ensure you have a healthy pregnancy.
Is that just in Scotland, or does it work right across the UK?
Unfortunately, it is just in Scotland, and we're really lucky here in Scotland that we get support from the Scottish Government. Our colleagues in Wales also get, they've just also secured funding from the big lottery. So both Scotland and Wales do have the funding to actually go out and speak to young people, and it would be fabulous if we could get the same in England and Northern Ireland, because this is something that is really, really needed. And I can touch upon some of the statistics. You know, we all think people have moved on so much and they're so much more aware of lifestyle factors, but it is quite frightening what the statistics of what our young people actually do know.
I was going to ask you that. Do you find that they have much understanding of fertility, and are they surprised by some of the things you tell them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things we do when we go out to colleges and universities is we get our young people to fill out a survey for us. And last year in Scotland, through colleges and universities, we must have engaged around 10,000 students. And from that, we got over 2,400 surveys completed. And you know, we would have had more surveys if actually we were able to engage that amount of students. I kid you not when I tell you it's manic when we go to freshers. You know, we could be sitting at a stand and we're surrounded by 10 students, and we can only engage so many. You know, we are really one of the most popular stands in freshers. But one of the things we ask students is, what do they think lifestyle factors that could impact the future fertility? And without a shadow of a doubt, smoking is still the #1 reason that young people think is the major cause of impacting the future fertility. And unfortunately, age is only sitting at 3% of students who actually think age is a factor in their fertility. And for us here in our charity, we know that's one of the biggest factors. You know, people come to us too late. So yeah, students are really surprised when we actually start talking to them about all of the various lifestyle factors. And of the students we get to complete this, only 28% think there is a lifestyle factor that could impact the future fertility. So that's 28% of all students recognise that there is lifestyle factors.
They're quite shocking, some of those figures really, about people not realising about age. But do you find when you're talking to young people, because I think we often think it's too far away for them, but is it something they're actually interested in learning more about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think particularly when we engage with the males, because one of the things we talk to them is about anabolic steroid use and the impact that could have on your sperm. Do you know, there's quite a light bulb moment when you're talking to young men about the impact they actually could have in the future. And quite often we go into some colleges and unis, and they're all different in Scotland, but you'll get some that are predominantly male just due to the courses that college or university is undertaking. And I can sometimes be talking to a group of 12 young men at the same time, and you can tell amongst them there's that some of them are actually participating and taking anabolic steroids, and you know, they're getting quite a ribbon from their friends about, oh right, okay, we didn't know that. And it's quite startling how little they actually know about some of the abusive substances they're actually using and the impact that will have in the future.
It's interesting you just mentioned young men, because I was going to ask you, we kind of imagine that this is something that young women might be interested in. And I think there's an idea that for men that might seem, you know, when they're in their 20s, that it's less important. But you're finding that men are equally interested in some of these things.
Our statistics shows from engagement in universities, and we're going by the surveys that we get completed, it's slightly over a third of our surveys are completed by males. But one of the really good things is, well, our last question is, as a result of being at the stall today, would you now consider changes in your lifestyle? And actually, men are even higher. They're 96% of them that participate in the survey say they will consider lifestyle factors and going forward, whereas with females it's 94%. So I think that's really encouraging, that having that engagement with men actually will make them consider changes to lifestyle factors.
What kind of things do you actually do with the young people when they come to visit the stand to help them understand more about infertility?
Okay, so one of the kind of key things for us is we don't want to frighten young people off so we don't go out to colleges and universities where Fertility Network logos and everything. We go out there, we've got pop-ups that are really colourful, and on those pop-ups we've got flags about weight, anabolic steroids, sexually transmitted infections, smoking, excess drinking. So for a lot of young people, if you were to look at our pop-ups, you'd think, oh, there's something to do with healthy lifestyles. But we also do quite a number of games, and that's quite obvious. We've got the alcohol goggles, we get young people, and this gets really competitive in a freshers hall, but we've got these really cute, cuddly sperm that we got from one of the drug companies, and we get the participants, we put on the alcohol goggles, we've got a bucket, and we get them to throw the sperm in the bucket, and you know, it becomes really, really good fun with young people because they're super competitive, and it's a bit of a laugh. But this is all quite symbolic for us. You know, the whole time they're doing that, I'm having that conversation with them about, you know, the alcohol goggles are giving them, you know, the feeling of if they were under the influence of alcohol, and you know, excess and binge drinking is really bad for fertility and pregnancy, but at the same time, you know, that's when most sexually transmitted infections take place. You know, if people get too drunk, then they're less likely to have protected sex. And the whole time they're playing, I'm having a conversation about, you know, if you do have unprotected sex, please go and get checked, you know, particularly with females. I talk to them about chlamydia, well, just, and it's all that subliminal messaging. At the same time, you know, we're getting a queue building up, other people want to participate in the game. So, you know, it's really just trying to find that level with young people where you're not there to lecture them, because that will immediately make them switch off. But we try to have fun with them, and we try to just give them, just if they take one piece of information away, then, you know, I think we've done a job in terms of trying to educate young people.
And do you get the impression from the young people you're talking to that your messaging is actually getting through to them, that it is actually going to make a difference?
Yeah, actually I do. We do an awful lot of colleges and universities in Scotland where we've got quite big nursing communities. So this is where all our student nurses are. And after freshers, you know, we've been contacted by nursing lecturers, by student nurses themselves who want us to come out and give more detailed presentations to the student year about, you know, how then to take this the next step further. So as much as we're talking about education, we also want to get the messaging right with our, you know, our clinicians of the future about how to engage with fertility patients. So yeah, from freshers, we actually get a number of students and lecturers who then will come back to us after the event to say, you know, that was really good messaging that you gave there, and we would like to come out and deliver presentations actually in the university or college.
So what are the key messages that you're trying to get across really to young people?
Our key messaging is, you know, we don't want to actually, you know, impose on the fun that young people have during their time. You know, they're only young ones, but what we want them to do is just be a bit more considerate of your personal health and well-being to ensure that in future years you haven't contributed to potentially making yourself and your partner infertile. You know, we share some of the heartbreak stories of patients, you know, who perhaps through some lifestyle choice they had while a student then discovered that they've got fertility issues in their late 30s.
You know, it's been absolutely brilliant to hear about all of this. And we often hear from fertility patients about things that they wish that they'd known when they were younger. Do you think a project like this, if it was across the country, could really make a difference to change the way that people think?
Oh, absolutely. Probably one of the some of the sad stories that I get from this, and I've engaged with hundreds of girls during freshers, and some of them tell me, and the way to their friends have left the stall, or they come back later on and they tell me they had chlamydia, and just because of the conversations I have with them, they tell me they're now worried that potentially they have got, you know, blockages or scarring in the fallopian tubes, which is a contributory factor to tubal disease, which can make them infertile. And I can have a conversation with them then, and some sort of reassurance, and you know, and I'm able to tell them, you know, it's good that you understand that there is a potential that could be the case. However, you know, I can then go and explain about, you know, IVF and how much it's moved on over the years. And the messaging I'll give to them is, you know, at the point you're trying for a baby, don't wait 3 years, 5 years. You know, if after 12 months and you're not been successful, go and get treatment, because as we all know in this charity, part of the problem is people leave it too late to actually seek help and support if they're struggling to have a family. So that's one of the things. I engage with a lot of girls that are really open and honest about they've got polycystic ovaries, and that's another thing, you know, and the same message to them is don't wait forever. At the point you're actually going to start trying for a family, recognise, you know, having abnormal periods isn't right, and you should be speaking to your doctor, and if need be, get early intervention to ensure you get the proper pathway towards fertility treatment.
Thank you, and thank you, Anya. Thank you both so much. It's been really brilliant to hear about all this great work that Fertility Network is doing to raise awareness. And although this is a National Fertility Awareness Week, I think it's really important to know that this work is going on throughout the year, every day, to try to raise awareness. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.